In the second segment of Create, Multiply, and Preserve, I really want to focus on the concept of multiplying. As I really sat down and deciphered what it means to multiply your wealth, and by wealth, we mean abundance, this idea of having a life that is balanced, but yet growing and multiplying. There's some areas that I want to focus on. I would like to focus on how do you multiply the creation, which I think is something that you really talk about, and I think that you are a pioneer on, is time management and how to establish habits that increase productivity in order to multiply wealth. And then I have a couple other niches with regards to multiplication that I want to talk about. But before we talk about those, I'd like to discuss productivity and time management and the importance of positioning and allocating your time to multiply your earnings.
Okay, great. Well, if you want to multiply yourself, it means that you want to get the very most out of yourself in life. And the way that you do that is by using your time better. In business, which has been my focus for decades, there are certain things that I've learned in the last few years that have been really eye-opening. One of them has to do with what is called business models. And there's about 50 different varieties of business models. And I studied this exhaustively. I put in hundreds of hours into the subject of business models. And then Harvard did a great study a few years ago, and they interviewed the presidents of the Fortune 500 companies, all 500. And they found that 80% of them admitted that their business model was not working. And they also admitted that they didn't really know what their business model was. And so they asked them, well, what is your plan to get a business model that works? A business model that works, your business model is your profit model. So basically it is equal. Business model equals profit model. These are the things that you do that generate profits at the end of the day. And there are specific things, very much like a menu or a recipe for a menu dish, is it has to have certain ingredients in certain proportions and mixed it exactly the right way in order for you to get the final dish. 80% of companies, big companies that have divisions of consultants and top people working in this area, are using the wrong business model. In fact, they just did a study of 200 companies that were in trouble. 199 of them were in trouble because they had an obsolete business model. It wasn't working. It wasn't generating profits. So I settled on this because I thought this was a way I could really be helpful to my companies, talking about multiplying. And so I would say, how can you tell if you have a good business model? This is to a room full of business owners. I said, well, your profits, your sales and your profits are going up and up and up, steady, 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 each month, each year. That's a good business model. You don't need to be here. Nobody moved. I said, the second is that your profits and sales are going up and down, up and down, up and down, fluctuating sort of in an uncontrollable way. Sometimes you have a good month, sometimes you have a bad month or year. The third is your sales are going down and go down and down. And this means that your business model is going to kill your business. And over, companies go broke because of the wrong business model. Now, here's one of the great one-liners that I learned. It said, whatever you are achieving today, you are achieving because of the way you have designed your company. The amount of sales, the amount of profitability, the amount of growth, everything is because of the design that you have chosen for your business. If you're not happy about any of the results that you're getting into your business, you have to go back and change the factors that are creating or generating those results. So you're earning today exactly what you have designed your life to earn. If you're not happy with it, then you have to redesign your life and your work. So in a business model, the whole purpose of a business model is to sell something to somebody and make a profit. Yes. And then do it again and do it again and do it on a wider scale. My friend Jay Abraham, you'll be talking to, he says there's 3 ways that you can increase sales. You can increase the number of sales in your business. You can increase the size of each individual sale, or you can increase the frequency of purchase. I always love those big 3. the amount of times that people come and buy from you. I worked with a restaurant chain that was 60 first-class restaurants nationwide, and I noticed that their service policies had changed over time. My wife and I used to go there once a month because it was a good restaurant. And then we started going there more often, once every 3 weeks. And I asked the manager, he said, yeah, we developed a plan, a business development plan, to get all of our best customers to come back more often. Because repeat business is really the great key to success. Getting a new customer costs 5 times as much as it costs, generally speaking, as to keep an old customer by making them happy. So they decided that they were going to get people who were coming every month, like ours, to come every 3 weeks. And so they began to add just little things in terms of customer service. And I noticed them. And for example, they said, if you would like to come to this restaurant, we'll give you a private number. You call this private number and you can get in to your table. Each person had a table with a picture of themselves at the table that they'd chosen. And irrespective of what time it is or day it is. And so a couple of times I come in from out of town and I call them and try to make a reservation for 7:30 Saturday night. Well, this restaurant is packed. However, because I had this special number, they put me instantly into the restaurant at 7:30. It's just a little thing like that that caused their loyal customers to be even more loyal and bring their friends. And they'd bring their friends and brag about it. And the friends would come, and then they'd become more loyal, and so on. And then the next thing they did is when you sat down, the first thing they do is serve you with a glass of champagne. Say, welcome back. We're happy to have you. Here's a glass of champagne. And champagne is such a sort of friendly, happy drink. And so people remembered that. And within a year and a half, they'd got their customers coming back instead of once a month, once every 2 weeks. Now, if you just work that out, that means that they doubled their business from their best customers, and they became one of the most profitable restaurant chains in the United States. Just a little thinking about how we can make our customers even happier, and especially our best customers. Well, that's part of the business model. They changed their business model. And so if you're not happy with what your business is doing, you have to change the business model. Now, there's 10 parts to a business model, and I have a full 2-day seminar that I do on this subject. And the first time I gave this seminar, it was 4 sessions per day for 2 days. So it's 8 sessions. And I got a standing ovation at the end of each session. At every break, people gave a standing ovation. They loved these ideas. So I'm going to give you the ideas that they love so much because it's the key to multiplying your business. Number one key that you start with is what is it that you sell? And you must be really clear, what is it that we sell in terms of how it affects the life of our customer? How does it change or how does it improve? How does it increase the value of the life or work of our customer? It's not the product. People don't buy a product. They buy the results of buying the product. They buy that what happens to them in their business or their personal life. And one of my favorite words of all in multiplying or in any area of business is clarity. Clarity is you've got to be really clear why somebody should buy your product or service and why what your product or service does and how it does it and how long it does it. This is the entire essence of your sales methodology, is the value or special reward that people get from buying your product rather than from someone else's. So that's the starting point, and it's quite amazing how many people are unclear about what it is. They have lots of reasons, but they don't have one reason. So the second key point that we'll talk about is who. Who exactly is your ideal customer? Who is the person or persons who most value and want what you give that nobody else can offer in your business model? And where are they? And when do they buy? And why do they buy? And how much do they pay? And here's another important point, is that in general, unless your product is a commodity, which means that It's not different in any way from your competitors. And your product is not a commodity. Nobody listening to this has a commodity product. It means that people don't care about the price. They don't care about the price as long as it's not outrageous. They don't care about the price in comparison with their competitors. What they care about is, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? What do I get? And if what you offer them, like the first-class restaurant I was talking about, you could get McDonald's, you could get a complete dinner for $10. In this restaurant, you would pay maybe $100 a person. And people line up around the block to get into this restaurant, if they possibly can, to pay those prices. They're not paying those prices to satiate their appetite. They're paying for a whole lot of other reasons. So you have to ask, what is the value that people get from us? And who are they? Who are the people who most treasure this value so that they will prefer us to someone else? If we can persuade them that if you buy from us, this is what you're going to get, which is different and better and superior from our competitors, that's how you get the business. And I'll give you a really simple, really good example. One of the richest men in the world was once a securities broker in New York, and he got tired of the business of phoning people and selling stocks and bonds. So he and his wife decided to move out to Seattle. His name was Jeff Bezos. And they drove out to Seattle, and while they were driving, he was working on his laptop computer looking for a business. And he came up with the idea of books, selling books at a discount, 30% off, and you just have to wait for them rather than going to the bookstore. And so he came up with an idea, and they set up their little setup in their basement, and you could buy a book from Amazon, get it in 7 days at 30% off. So since people are not going to buy a book and read it on the way home, people were willing to wait a little bit for a book that they'd heard about or wanted. And then what he would do is he made arrangements with the various publishers that he'd get the orders and he'd send them by email to the publisher. Publisher would send them to the customer. So that was the start of Amazon. Today, you hear they just opened another 50,000 square foot warehouse down the street from here so that they can get stuff faster and faster. Now, if you buy something from Amazon, you get it the next day. And it's quite astonishing. I buy books from Amazon because I love books. And if you order a book, they say, thank you very much for your order. It's in process. Then later on in the day, you say, thank you very much for your order. Your book has been shipped. And then later on in the days, they say, thank you very much. Your book has been shipped. It will be delivered on such and such a day, which is usually this day or the next day. And then your book is on its way and will be at your front door by 3 o'clock this afternoon. And then you get a final email, and it says, your book is there, and it shows you a photograph of the book at your front door. And you go to your front door and you open it, there's the book. Do you think that anybody will ever come up with a business to compete with Amazon ever in the history of the world? And they're making billions and billions. They're doing more than $1 trillion in business. And Jeff Bezos is worth about $330 billion. He's got a yacht about as big as the Queen Mary. It's amazing. And why? It's because he focused on what is it that people want, is they want convenience. And they don't care if the book costs more or less, but he's going to give them a 30% discount if they buy from him, and they're going to get it fast and delivered and guaranteed. If you don't like it, you can send it back. I mean, it was like a miracle of all the best ingredients that enabled him to become one of the richest people in the history of the world, and in a very short period of time, like Elon Musk, who came up with this idea of Tesla and is now the biggest seller of electric cars in the world. And it became one of the second or third richest people in the world, too. Everything is based on satisfying customers in some way. So the first two is what is it that you sell? What is the value? What is the satisfaction? What is the happiness? Like Jerry Shea, who founded Zappos, who wrote a book called Delivering Happiness. He said, we're in the happiness business. We just happen to sell shoes. but whatever business we're in, we sell happiness. And that is a perfect attitude to have. So the second part is who are your customers who value the happiness that you deliver? I mean, if you have a steak restaurant, you don't advertise to vegetarians, because no matter how good your steaks are, no matter how good your service is, these are not your customers. So being really clear about who your customers are and who they aren't is important. So the third part is, who is your competitor? Is who are you competing with who wants the same customer dollar? And the interesting thing is that the competition is not just people who sell the same product you do, it's any other use of the money. Because money is fungible. That means it can be spread and used in different ways. But a person only has a certain amount. They can only buy a certain amount. Some years ago, I worked for Carnival Cruise Lines. I did seminars for their top managers, and in exchange for what is called a captain's cabin, or an owner's cabin on the ship. I took my whole family, and they gave us basically a suite. It's way up on the ship, and it looks over everything. It's just great in exchange for a live seminar. And so I asked them when I was preparing the seminar, I said, so who is your competition? Is it like an Empress? Is it Viking? They said, no. Our competition is not other shipping lines. Our competition is land-based vacations. Is that there's never going to be enough ships to handle all of the people who want to take cruises. But it's people who want to go to the mountains or go to the beach or something else. That's who we compete against. So all of their advertising is focused on people who, up to now, have been taking land-based vacations. That's their customer, the land-based vacation. They've already got the people who go on cruises. So they have to ask, who is my competition, and how and why are we different and superior to our competition in giving our customers satisfaction, pleasure, happiness, so they say automatically, I want them. I prefer them. They're better. They make me happier. Just like Jerry Shea's idea is, each company is in the business of customer happiness. Is if you have to make your customers emotionally happier than your competitors do. And then the fourth part of the new business model is how do you get what we call the goods out of the woods? How do you get the product to the customer? What are your methods of sales and marketing and advertising? What are your methodologies and processes that get people to buy from you the first time? And then we say the key in sales is to get them to buy again, and bring their friends. Those are the golden triangle of sales, is to get them to buy the first time, and then make them so happy that they buy again, and then make them so happy that they encourage their friends and give you referrals. No company can live without the second sale. So all success in business is based on the second sale, and then the second sale leads to the referral. If you can't get referrals, you will be out of business in a certain period of time. If people aren't so happy that they tell their friends, grab their friends, say, you've got to buy from this particular company, then you'll soon run out of business. So those are the four. Now, there's additional ones like where are you going to get the money? Who are the partners, and what kind of partnerships will you require in order to perform any one of these functions, and so on. But the first four are the most important. What do you sell, defined in terms of customer satisfaction, customer happiness, is who do you sell it to, who is your competition, and why do people buy from your competition, and how do you promote? And if you look at those four, most people that I've worked with, and I have now done management consulting and strategic planning for more than 1,000 companies over the course of my career. Most of these programs have been 2- and 3-day programs. A huge number, more than 100 of them have been billion-dollar multinational corporations. And I take the entire group and sit them together, often in a resort, and I walk them through a series of exercises to analyze their business along the lines we just talked about, plus much more. And the whole goal is to grow the business, grow the sales, and grow the profitability. When we talk about return on investment. All of strategic planning is aimed at increasing not only return on investment, the amount they've invested in the company, but also return on energy, the amount of energy you're putting into it, and the return on equity, the amount of actually capital, including borrowed capital. So your job is to get higher and higher returns to multiply. If you want to multiply, there's no other way to do it. And so one of the things we say is that the key to growing your business is to go and sit and talk to your customers. Get to your customers and sit down with them face to face and ask them, what do we have to do to get your business? What do we have to do to get all your business? What do we have to do more of? There's 4 keys to success in multiplying. You ask the question, what do we need to do more of in order to make you happy so that you buy more from us, and you buy only from us, and you tell other people to buy from us? Number 2, what do we need to do less of? Because very often companies are doing things which they think are helpful to their customers, and the customers are indifferent. They don't care. You know, like you have fancy packaging. Who cares about the packaging? What I'm concerned with is what's in the package and how soon I get it and how fast I can use it to be happy. So therefore, sometimes companies are wasting a lot of time and money on activities that are not valued at all by the customer. A perfect example is Elon Musk has bought Twitter. He went in and he looked at the entire company and fired 75% of the techies, the people that were basically the backbone of the company. He found that basically they weren't doing anything that the customers valued. They were doing things that they enjoyed and all kinds of technical things, but customers didn't care about it all. So he fired 75% of the staff, and there was zero decline in efficiency or customer satisfaction. And that saved the company billions of dollars because these people were very highly paid. So it's important that you know why people are buying from you. And so the third way that you can change a business is you can start to do something that you're not doing now. What is it that you are not doing that customers want you to do? And this is helping and forcing people to break out of their comfort zones. Because once people get into a comfort zone or start doing something on a regular basis, and you talked before about Newton's third law of gravity, the law of inertia, is a body in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. A body at rest tends to remain at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. So if companies start to become satisfied with what they're doing, the law of inertia sets in and they resist change. They get into a comfort zone and they resist change of any kind. And so what you have to keep asking is what should we be doing now that we're not doing today? So what should we do more of? What should we do less of? What should we start doing that we're not doing? And what you do is you just keep looking at the marketplace and find out what are your competitors doing? What are other companies in indirect industries doing? What are the most successful companies doing? How could you duplicate some or all of that or add it into your marketing mix and so on, and constantly be looking for ways, because as we talked about, that if it works, it's already obsolete. If it works, it's already being replaced by a competitor in the market with something that's better, faster, and cheaper. And those are the 3 most important things today: better, faster, cheaper, better, faster, cheaper. And keep comparing your products or services. Are they better, faster, cheaper than your competitors? And if not, what would you have to do to make them the 3? And as I said before, they don't have to be the cheapest. They don't even have to be all 3. They could just be one. It could be better or faster. Amazon has proven that the prices, you could buy the same products anywhere, but they're faster. They can get it to you faster. And Americans worldwide, all people are very impatient. They want satisfaction now.
Yes.
And if you have 2, one promises delivery today, one promises delivery the day after tomorrow, I don't care about the price. Unless the price is enormous, I'll always get the one that will deliver faster. I wrote a book some years ago, which was well received, and it's called Something for Nothing. And in the book Something for Nothing, which is based on actually several decades of research in economics, business, psychology, what I said is that each person has 7 characteristics. They are lazy, they're greedy, they're ambitious, impatient, and so on. And they have 7 goals that they want in life. And the only question is, how do you get from the person, normal for people, to the goal? And that brings us to what I call the expediency theory. And the expediency theory says that people always seek the fastest and easiest way to get the thing they want, with little concern for the long-term consequences of their behavior. And this, to me, is the governing principle of human life.
Yes.
The expediency factor. And so what you have to do is you have to shape your business externally and internally in such a way that it is expedient for people to do things that are beneficial to you. For example, when companies offer bonuses for performance, then the expedient thing to do is to perform so you get the bonuses. So it's a good thing. Expediency is neither good nor bad. It just is. It's a fact. Your job is to make it so that the expedient thing that your staff does is also what is the best for the company. The expedient thing that the customer, that you do in serving the customer, is best for the customer. So your job is to be expedient, is to find faster, easier, better, cheaper, newer, different ways to accomplish the same goal so that people prefer your offering to that of somebody else's. And so you come back to your business, you say, how do you build a business where you multiply it? Well, people are expedient. They're selfish. They do exactly what they think is the very best for them now. So your job is to structure your business in such a way that everybody feels expediently that the very best place to be and to work hard is this business. And sometimes people say, well, people should be motivated because of self-fulfillment and so on. People will wave at you with one finger with that because that's not what they want. What they want is they want the very most for the very least.
Yes.
And your job is to show them that in your company, to get the very best for the very least, work for us and do our job. And then internally, you make it so that working for you is the most attractive option, that you offer certain things that other companies don't offer. One of the best compliments I've had, and I've run something like 22 businesses over the years, is people say, working for you is the best job I ever had. I've heard that so many times, and it's so flattering to hear that because that was my goal. And the way that I achieved that was I involved them in all decisions that involved them, that affected them. And we would sit and talk and discuss, debate, and sort of generally agree that we would do this or not do that or so on. So everybody felt...
You democratized the process and you gave them a voice.
Yes, gave them a voice. And for example, very simple thing that you can do as a manager is we had a staff meeting once a week. I found that the best day is always Tuesday morning, not Monday. And there would be an agenda, and on the agenda would be the items that you were going to discuss and everybody's name. Everybody was an agenda item. So when we would start off the meeting, we would go around the table, 10, 12 people, and each person would answer 3 questions. What they're working on now, what are their problems, and what help do they need from other people? 1, 2, 3. And they could add anything else they wanted, but every person had to basically explain what they were doing and what they were wrestling with and so on. And we would go around the table. Another thing I would do is every week, a different person would be in charge of the meeting.
Huh.
A secretary, accountant, or somebody else. So each week, someone else was responsible for the meeting, and that made them feel really important because everybody deferred to them for the length of the meeting. And Then we would talk about things of general interest. And a simple technique like that, meeting once a week, everybody's name on as an agenda item, and have one of your staff run the meeting. It's a great thing that builds tremendous loyalty.
Yes.
And
leadership.
And leadership. That's right. And responsibility. Very important. So these are some of the things that you can do to multiply the success of a business. But what is most important is making sales. What's most important is thinking, everybody has to be thinking, how do we generate revenues? Because if we have revenues, everything is possible.
Everything is possible.
Don't have enough revenues, nothing is possible. And so keep people thinking about that, because other than that, they get immersed in their jobs and completely detached from revenue generation.
From the business responsibility of whether you like it or not, your salary is dependent on the business's performance. Therefore, it is in your best interest to understand that your performance is vital to the operation, because you have skin in the game. Like you expressed this idea of giving people some sort of sense of ownership. So when you have the sense of ownership, whether through leadership or opportunities, now if something is like a thorn in the flesh of the business, they feel it. And they're not disassociated with the growth or the loss of the business, but they sympathize with it, which is this concept that I wanted to transition to, which is this idea of, if you want to multiply wealth, you need to learn how to build teams. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it's this concept of really being in a situation where, like John Maxwell famously said, a leader knows the way, goes the way, but then shows the way. And if you want to be in a situation whereby you show the way, a leader first must do, and then they have to show and teach and educate, and then allow people to perform. But a lot of people trying to scale organizations, Brian, they are having issues. They don't know how to multiply an organization. They don't know how to keep their staff content. Could you share a little bit about multiplying the organization from the manpower standpoint? How do you manage morale? And how do you keep your people focused on the goal?
Well, great question. When I was a young man, I traveled through Africa from the Mediterranean all the way to Johannesburg. And one of the things I did is stopped at the village of Dr. Albert Schweitzer in Lamborghini in the Central Africa, and stayed there for a week, working, helping them to build a new hospital. And afterwards, I studied Schweitzer, and it's very, very interesting story. But he had one quote that I never forgot. He said, "You must teach men at the school of example, for they will learn at no other."
Huh.
And you've heard the old saying, do what I say, not what I do. And which is a bum piece of advice, is that if you want people to be a particular way, you have to demonstrate that behavior in everything that you do. If you want people to communicate with each other, you have to ask a lot of questions and listen and take notes, just exactly the way you would want them to behave. With regard to building a team, again, your great friend is this, is you write down, or even sit in conjunction with one or two friends, write down what are all the qualities that we want on a new team member for one of our staff. And they will give you all kinds of great ideas. You don't have to accept all of them, but now you have a framework for what you're looking for. What kind of a person are you looking for? Positive, experienced, ambitious, enthusiastic, and so on. And then you develop interview questions, and the interview questions are usually pretty common. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your goals for the long term? What do you want to achieve? Where would you like to be in 5 years? And so on. And as you ask questions, listen to the answers, and then listen to your gut. And your gut will tell you if this is a good prospective employee or not. Now, there's a couple of things about this that I've found very useful. One is that in any corporate situation, you'll probably have people that shouldn't be there.
Sure.
And so there's a principle that I learned from Peter Drucker. I love it because I teach it and people build it into their lives forever. It's called zero-based thinking. And zero-based thinking, you ask the question, is there anything that I am doing today that, knowing what I now know, I would not start up again today? I would not get into it again today. And what you do is you imagine you have a little zero-based thinking frame, and you put this and look at every single person in your room, office, and look at everything that you're doing. Just like I mentioned earlier that Steve Jobs, when he went back to Apple, found they had 104 products and only 4 were making a profit. So what he did is he zero-based the 100 products. And it's very traumatic if your whole life and paycheck and potential future is wrapped up in a product line that's about to be
hurts
disowned.
Emotionally. It's the same thing when you buy a stock and it tanks and you don't want to cut the loss because you're emotionally attached to the trade.
Well, you know, it's interesting. One of the most common techniques in stock market investing is a stop loss, where basically you say, if it goes to this point, sell it automatically. It's sold by the computer. You do not have any input into this. It's sold at this point. Well, so zero-based thinking, every company has, and every individual has areas that need to be zero-based. And how can you tell a zero-base? Well, the number one is stress. Is something that causes you stress. It causes you preoccupation. It makes you angry when you think about it. It frustrates you and so on. A good friend of mine who's a management consultant said, the very best time to fire someone is the first time it crosses your mind. The first time it crosses your mind, because when it crosses your mind, it's all over. Now you're just playing on borrowed time. Because the fact is that when you think about firing them, that's the bottom line of everything that has happened up to now, and just do it. I was talking to a business owner, and he told me this experience. He has an advisor, and who comes in about once a month, an older man, and sort of asks him how things are going, sort of like a father figure. And one day he came in on a Monday, and he said, how's everything going? He said, well, it's going fine except for my accountant, who's been with me since the start of the business. But the business is growing far beyond him, and he just can't handle the job. And he said, well, what are you going to do about it? He said, well, I'm going to let him go. And I said, when are you going to let him go? And he said, Friday. This is Monday. He said, we'll let him go on Friday. He said, why are you going to wait till Friday? And he said, well, you're right. He said, I should do it now. He said, yes, you should. So he said, wait here. And he got up and went to his accountant's office, closed the door. They've been friends. Families had gone to Christmas parties together, everything. And he explained to him that he just can't keep up with the job, and the company can't continue to grow with him in this position. And so he has to replace him.
Firing him on Friday was an emotional reaction to the relational aspect that both individuals shared, whereby let me give him another week of salary, not thinking from a business owner standpoint, more thinking from a relational standpoint. And then on the other side, you end up being in a situation where it's like, but logically speaking, if I'm the business owner and this person is not performing, they shouldn't be here. So I should just go have a conversation with them right now. So I understand the discrepancy, because it happens many times.
Well, there's also a rule, and I've done enormous work in this area, is that if you fire a person on Friday, they go home and sulk for the next 2 days. And they're much more likely to sue you, commit suicide, all kinds of things. If you fire them on Monday, they can hit the ground on Tuesday looking for a new job. So whenever I've had to fire somebody, I do it it's the day that it's necessary. But I allow them to continue, as long as it's a happy separation. I allow them to keep their office, take messages, look for a job out of my office, and make it as pleasant as possible.
So you create an ecosystem as well, an environment of transition that respects the efforts that were attached to them.
So there's no animosity. You don't try to get even with people. I was called into a large company and asked to fire the president of the company. And I've been involved with this company for a long time. And they said he needs to be fired, needs to be replaced. But it's very challenging to do it because a big company is intertwined with so many different people. Somebody has to let him down, let him off the ship. And so I went and I sat with them, and I told them, I said, I will fire him, but under a couple of conditions. Number one is that we protect his face. Is that nobody ever says anything that would embarrass him in the market where he will be working. So that he was this or he was that or anything. No, is we protect his face. No matter what he says, we always speak of him in a complimentary and positive way. And the second thing is that if I'm going to fire him, it has to be effective immediately. And so the people on the board agreed, and that's what I did. And there was a lot of controversy later, and people were upset and threatened lawsuits and everything else. But by the time it was over, there was no public controversy. His face was protected, and he left with dignity. So he could then move on with his career with no problems behind him to worry about. And that's a really important thing. Sometimes people feel that firing is a chance to get even with the bastard because he did a lousy job.
Yeah.
Really? And who hired him in the first place into that lousy job? Think about that.
Yeah, that's something that I always kind of self-reflect on with hires or with staff or freelancers or contractors. It's like you talk about this process of going back and revisiting your lessons, right, to ensure that you don't repeat them.
Yes.
And we talk about this concept of iteration, and you also iterate your hiring process and your ability to find talent. But at the end of the day, you're responsible. Like the person that is hired there you're at fault. How they perform, you're at fault. The systems that they operate under, you're at fault. And I think that whether it's true or not intrinsically, the assumption of responsibility allows you to continue growing in the process of iteration.
Yes, it's so important. The story that I was telling you, he said, I should do it now. So we went down to the accountant's office and closed the door and had a conversation. He explained that no animosity, no attack. It's just the company can't grow with him in this position. They need someone else. And so they embraced, and he gave him lots of severance pay and time to move out and everything else. And then they shook hands, and he went back to his office where the older man was waiting. He said, "What did you do?" He said, I let him go, effective immediately. He said, "What did you learn from this experience?" And he said, "What I learned was that if you have to do something, do it immediately. Don't drag it out. Don't look for excuses or reasons. Just do it now." And that is one of the most important things that you can learn in business. Is if you were ever going to do it immediately. Zero-based thinking says, take this picture frame and look at every part of your business, every product, every service, every person, every activity, every advertising expense. If you were not now doing this, or had not now hired or appointed this person, would you do it again today? And if the answer is no, then how do you get out and how fast? How do you get out and how fast? And it's interesting, I was on a plane once, and I was sitting next to a guy. I said, "What do you do?" And it was in first class. And he said, "I do corporate turnarounds." I said, "Really?" He said he has a small company. And when a company gets into trouble, the board of directors will contact him privately.
Interesting.
And they will install him as the new president. And he will bring two people, an accountant and a marketing person. So have these three people in his company. And they come in and they have 2, 3, 4, 6 months to turn the company around. And then they receive a bonus if they've done that and move on to the next company.
Wow.
He said, "The business is good." He said, "We have a whole list of major companies that you would know about that were lined up for us and as were available. I said, well, how do you go in and turn around the company? He said, we just use this, didn't use the word, but zero-based thinking is we just look at everybody and we have no emotion attached to any of the staff.
Yeah, they're being brought out from the outside. They don't care.
That's right. They have only one job, which is to earn their bonus, which is getting the company back into profitability. So the accountants go through all the finances to find out what can be changed. The marketing guy goes through all the marketing to find out how to generate more sales. And what he does is he just goes through and calls out all the staff members who, based on his analysis, he feels are no longer appropriate. And he said, and the company just turns around like a big ship in the water. It just turns around. We get our bonuses, several $100,000, and go on to the next company. And I still remember that conversation. We're flying along, and he's explaining to me exactly what he did. And what I explained to him was so simple. He said, well, I can do that. Yes, you could. If you had the experience and the perspicacity, the knowledge. There was a man named Chainsaw Al Dunlop. He was very famous. He's in all the business papers a few years ago. And he was a turnaround specialist. And his name was Chainsaw. His nickname was Chainsaw.
Just hacking away.
Because when they sent him into a company, it was in all the newspapers. When they sent him into the company, Chainsaw's been sent in.
Chainsaw's in town. Get ready.
It means there's got to be massive staff changes in a company. And he turned his company, every company that he was put in charge of, he turned around. He said, didn't make any friends. When he left, everybody in the company hated his guts. But he left with huge bonus, and he was famous for it. You could probably look it up in Google and find his story, because in the financial press, they just loved writing about him because he's doing and what he did. So the same thing, you need to be like a Chainsaw Al Dunlap in running your business, and you need to do it on a go-forward basis every day. Every day you get new information. Every day you get feedback from the market that tells you that what you thought was a good thing to do and what has worked in the past is no longer appropriate. And what you have to do is stop it. So the older gentleman, go back to the story, asked the younger boss, he said, what did you learn from this experience? And he said, if you're going to do it immediately. He said, don't hesitate. Don't drag it out, because it's just painful for everybody and of no value and no use to the company. And so that's the mark of the leader. The leader has the ability to make the decision.
Yes.
When we talked about earlier about great generals and Napoleon lost battles, but there are a couple of occasions where the French army was defeated, and Napoleon led them in what is called an orderly retreat. There's two types of retreats. One is a disorderly, that is called a rout, where the defeated army runs. And they're easily destroyed by an attacking force. Or there's an orderly retreat where the army retreats in order, and so that the attackers cannot destroy the army because they're lined up and they're armed and everything else. And very often by retreating in order, Napoleon would actually drag out the other army, and they get all excited and they come and they get out of order completely, and then he would turn his army around and counterattack and just tear them to pieces like a rotary lawnmower going through grass. And he talks about how he lost a battle by 5 o'clock and then won it back by 6 o'clock because of this orderly retreat rather than disorderly. So it's very important when you have problems in your business that you make an orderly retreat. You take the time to think about it. The very smartest leaders that I see are ones that think about it overnight. They say, before I'm making a final decision, I see the things that we should do or not do, but let me think about it tonight, and I'll give you my final decision tomorrow. Because when you take some time to think about any major decision, it becomes easier, and you see it with greater clarity, and your likelihood of making the right decision is much better than if you make the decision and then act impulsively. So it's important that you make the decision, but it's also important that you take a little bit of time to think about it, because just like with Napoleon's cases, He could turn a defeat into a victory, but only by going carefully, one step at a time, retreating in an orderly way. So that's what I've done, and I've had to fire a couple of senior executives in companies. They bring me in and ask me to do it because they don't want to have it on their hands when they now have to replace the person, and the person had friends, and there's all kinds of politics. So I come in and they all hate me. But my number one requirement is no loss of face. We don't do or say anything that causes this person to lose face. And what happens is the separation works perfectly. There's argument and there's dissent and people are upset and everything else. But it dies down quite quickly because you didn't stab anybody in the eye. You didn't hurt their ego and you didn't say anything outside the company that suggested that this was not a good person. So always was a good person, but this was the wrong job for them at this time. That's it. But what about this? What about that? Well, he or she's a good person, but not the right job for them at this time. And so we mutually agreed to do something else. And your job, again, as the leader, is to make sure that every person on your team is somebody who you would rehire tomorrow. Or if they decided to leave, you would argue with them. There's a lot of people you say, well, what if so-and-so threatened to leave? Would you argue with them? Nope. I'd say, oh, you want to leave?
Bye.
Well, that's too bad. So always ask, is there anybody working for you that knowing what you now know, you wouldn't hire back again today? Is there anybody in a position of responsibility that knowing what you know, you wouldn't give them this position again? And especially when it comes to sales and marketing, generating cash flow for the company, you really got to be hard in that area, because cash flow is like, we say, blood to the brain. Is if you don't have the cash flow, a company can survive anything but no cash flow. If they don't have any cash flow, the company will die very quickly.
It's the lifeblood of the business. There's John Maxwell, another Maxwell quote says, there's a verse in the Bible, and then Maxwell, I think, completes it, that says, without vision, people perish. It's this verse in Proverbs. But then the following side, on the business side, is without cash flow, the business perishes. So it's great that you have a vision, but if you have no money, there's no way to see this business come into fruition.
Yes. And things can change very quickly. So we'll go back to our discussion of the business model. Your business is giving you exactly the result you have designed it to give. If you're not getting the results you want, you've got to change the business model and just be open to the fact that 80% of companies are working with deficient business models. 80%, according to the very best studies. And your job is to be open to the possibility that you could be wrong. This is one of the things I've taught over and over again, is people hate to be wrong, but always be open to the possibility that you could be wrong, that you could be completely wrong, that your most cherished conclusion or idea may be completely wrong. And if that were the case, then what would you do? And you'll find that the very best leaders are very clear about what they want, but they're very flexible with regard to approaching their major problems or goals in a different way.
In regards to teams, before I transition to the last part of multiplying that I think is something where you can shed a lot of light on, is this concept of how do you interact with team morale? How do you boost team morale? We talk about multiplying your business requires people. You're not dealing with robots. If you want to run a full AI business, right, where you're just running commands, ones and zeros, that makes sense. But when you're dealing with humans and you're dealing with people, then you're also dealing with emotions. You're dealing with morale. You're dealing with culture, teams. Can you talk a little bit about the emotional and relational tips and advice to really nurture the team to be yes, money's important. We need the cash flow, we need the business, but the team has to be playing together. They have to be wearing the same shirt. Can you talk a little bit about managing team morale, team emotions for multiplication?
I think that the most important piece of advice in dealing with people comes from Dale Carnegie, and he said, make people feel important. Make people feel important. You can never go wrong making people feel important. So how do you make people feel important? Well, one of the simplest of all ways is to ask them good questions and then listen attentively to the answers. I've worked with great executives, and I remember one especially who had such a great influence on my life. And he would ask a question, and then he would, and the person, either me or someone else, would give the answer, and he'd write it down. He'd jot it down. And this was a very, very big boss, but he would write down what I said. He'd write it down as if it was really important to him, because he didn't want to forget it. And so asking questions and then listening closely to the answers and just making note of it causes people to feel valuable and important. And so just like with my story about my son, Michael, I asked him what exactly happened and what did you do? And I developed, got the whole story. And then we said, now, what do we need to do to punish you for this? And he said, well, I should be grounded. I said, for how long? He said, 1 week. I said, no, it's not enough. I said, how about a month? He said, okay. I said, I'll make you a deal. I'll put you in charge of your own grounding. I'm not going to watch you, but you'll have to come home from school every night. But if you do that, you can have Saturday free, get out of jail for all day Saturday. But you be your own jailer. You be in charge of your own grounding. And he was absolutely perfect about that. He came home every night right after school. And then on Saturday, he went out with his friends and came home Sunday and grounded himself for an entire month on that basis. And he never, ever got into that kind of trouble again. So asking people for their opinion and listening to their opinion. And then you can say, well, what about this or what about that? If you see something that's a little bit weak in it. But being open to the opinions of other people when you are the boss is a powerful way to build people and makes them loyal. It makes them feel that they can be completely honest with you. They can ask you questions or tell you things and so on. I used to say to my staff, I said, there's nothing wrong with making a mistake as long as you learn from it. So the key is to accept responsibility and learn from it. And I remember the next day I had one of my staff people came in and he said, I made a mistake and it cost the company this amount of money. All mistakes cost money. No free mistakes. And he said, but I am responsible and this is what I learned. Just perfect. I am responsible and this is what I learned. And he had written out 3 things that he had learned about this so he wouldn't repeat the same mistake. And everybody began to use the same formula. Whenever they had a problem of any kind, they'd say, I am responsible and this is what I learned. If you encourage your people to think like this, then they don't feel negative and they don't feel devalued or they don't feel insulted. They feel stronger and smarter. And then I always compliment them on their analysis. That's really good. That's excellent. Because sometimes the things they learn are really neat things. They're things you hadn't even thought of. And that's another way to build tremendous loyalty, is if people are not afraid to make mistakes because they know you're not going to be upset, all you're concerned with is using them as learning experiences, then they will try far more things and they'll achieve far more things.
As we talk a little bit about teams, at the end of the day, we talk about this idea of you as the business owner, you as the product owner. At the end of the day, you are responsible, right? How your staff performs, how your business performs, whether you are at fault or not is irrelevant. That's not the question. Is who's responsible, and it's you. And inside this factor of responsibility and multiplication, you are world renowned for time management and the self management. Because if you can't manage self, you can't manage others. And if you can't manage your day to day, and if you can't manage how you establish habits, how you go about being productive, then how can you expect anybody in your company to be doing otherwise? We talked about leadership is leading by example, so people have to be able to, in a visible fashion, notice in an exemplary fashion what you're trying to convey to them, which is work hard, show up, whatever your culture, vision, mission, values is. Talk to me a little bit about what it looks like to develop at an individual level in self-leadership, a relationship with yourself where you are being efficient with your time, where you are good at managing your time, which ultimately will lead to being a good leader.
Well, let me give you a couple of points, and I've written full books on this, several hundred pages of methods and techniques and so on. But there's about 2 or 3 ideas that I want to share with you. The first one is something that I learned in my coaching program, and I call it the Law of 3. And the Law of 3 says that if you make a list of everything you do in the course of a week or a month, the average person does between 20 and 30 different things. Some people do 40 or 50, but mostly it's 20 to 30 things. You write them all down. And then you ask this question: if I could only do one thing before I was called out of town for a month, what one thing would make the most valuable contribution to my company? And that usually pops out at you. So that's number one. And then you ask the question again: if I could only do 2 things before I was called out of town for a month, which would be the second most valuable? And that takes a little bit more time, but it usually becomes clear. And then you say, if I could only do 3 things, what would be number 3? Now you'll find, surprise, surprise, those 3 represent 90% of the value that you contribute to your business. 90%. Which, when we were talking about Warren Buffett saying that my secret to success is I just say no to anything but the top 2 or 3 tasks that I have in front of me, because everything else is a relative waste of time. So that's the starting point. What are the 3 things that you do that contribute the most value? If you ask most people, they say, well, I have to think about it for a while. Well, that means you're just wandering around at work with no idea of why you're there. So then the second exercise, which I like to share with people, and which has made my book, Eat That Frog, such a worldwide success, and it's probably the best exercise of all, and all kinds of corporations have used it. You make a list at the end of every day. You finish the day. This is the final exclamation point at the end of the sentence. And you make a list of everything you have to do tomorrow. You take your list from the previous day, and you never not work from a list. You always work from a list. If something comes up and somebody says, would you do this, call this person, do that, or write it down. Don't do it until it's written down, because other than that, you'll start to scatter. Your attention will scatter. You'll lose track of where you are. And by the end of the day, you'll have done nothing. You'll have just wasted your time on little irrelevant things. So the last thing you do at the end of each day is make a list of everything you have to do the following day. Then you ask yourself, if I could only do one thing on this list before I was called out of town for a month, which one activity would I be sure to complete? And whatever it is, that is where you start tomorrow morning. The next morning when you come in, you go straight to work on that task, and you work at it nonstop until it's completed. You've already decided that there's nothing more valuable that you could possibly do. Everything else that you would do is of secondary or tertiary or no value at all. So you've decided that this is number 1. Just work on number 1. Now, the first time you try to do this, you'll find it's extraordinarily difficult. You're so easily distracted. You're like an attention
all over the place.
You're like an attention deficit disorder dog or a cat. You just can't pay attention. And you'll have this irresistible urge to get up and go and get coffee and talk to people and check your email and so on. And what you have to do is you have to be held down. And there are some companies that the first thing they do is they train people in this. And the boss will stand there and supervise them and check and keep checking so that the person who has this irresistible tendency to get up and move around finally realizes that you do not get up to complete that task. And after that, then you can take a break, give yourself a reward, go and talk to a friend, have a cup of coffee, go for lunch, whatever it is. But start every day by completing your most important task. This is the key for cure for procrastination. And procrastination is not only, as they say, the thief of time, it's the thief of life.
Yes.
If you can overcome procrastination, you will double your productivity that day. If you can overcome procrastination, you can become one of the most productive people in your business. You'll earn more money, you'll feel better, you'll achieve more, you'll be paid more. Everything good will happen to you when you develop a reputation for starting and completing your most important task. Then you look at your list and you say, if once you've completed that, you say, now, if I could only do one more task before I was called out of town for a month, I always like that metaphor, which would it be? Whatever it is, start work on that. And just discipline yourself to keep working on your most important task each time. Now, you may end up with most of your list untouched, but it doesn't matter because you've already decided that those items are of no value.
Yes.
In comparison with the items that are of value. And this one technique is so powerful that if you do it, it will change your life. It will help you eliminate procrastination and make you not only productive, but you'll be happier. You'll be happy to know that you're on top of everything. And there are companies, more and more companies, are making this exercise mandatory. And if you don't do it, you're going to goddamn be fired. I mean, excuse the expression. They get really adamant, really pissy about whether you do this or not. Now, I worked with IBM, and they started booking me in 1984. And in 1984, I studied them a lot. They had 82% of the world computer market. And 82%.
Wow.
World computer market. They just literally were the giants of the industry. And they had a really good president who was the son of the founder, Thomas J. Watson Jr. And he retired. And so the board of directors got together and they said, we are so big and so good and so powerful and so profitable. We need a new president who's got sort of like a new vision. So they brought in a man named John Akers. And John Akers was out of accounting and engineering. And he said, we are not a sales company. Selling is the dirty side of the business. It's sort of like what we have to do to keep the doors open. But what we are is an engineering company. And so all the emphasis was put on the engineers. The salespeople were dissed. Sales managers were dissed. They were given piles and piles of papers to fill out every single day, so they couldn't go out and make calls. And within a few months, the sales started to just decline. Within a year, the sales had gone down. Within another year, IBM was losing billions of dollars from the giant of the world, the giant of the industry. And it was a great company. I loved IBM. I did more than 30 talks for IBM and leadership and other subjects. And they realized that they had made a mistake. And so after about 5 years of this, IBM hanging on by its fingernails, they fired John Akers and all the people around him, and they brought in a new guy named Lou Gerstner. And Lou Gerstner was the president of RJR Nabisco, which was called the Cookie Company. And he came in, found by consultants. He came in and he said, look, I don't even know how to turn on a computer. I don't have one. I don't use them. He said, but I know how to sell stuff. He said, and he brought all the salespeople back into the room. And he said, from now on, sales eats first. And everybody exploded. Sales eats first. And in other words, the salespeople who had built the company were back. And he focused everything on sales. And then he introduced the law of three. And the law of three, every manager worked with every single person to agree, what are your big three? What are my big three, your big three? What is everybody's big three? And then everybody worked on the big three. And all they did was talk and work on the big three. And that company went like this, and it went back up, and their sales doubled, and their profits doubled, and IBM went back to being king of the world.
Can your big three be are they at a personal individual level, or can you have the big three at a company-wide level that everybody's working towards at a micro?
In this case, it was individual responsibility.
Sure.
Because you can't assign a person responsibility for a corporate-wide goal.
Yes.
Nothing happens. So the salespeople knew they had to make more calls, make more presentations, and make more follow-up in sales. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The managers knew they had to arrange scheduling, arrange training, arrange transportation, finding. In other words, everybody knew their big three. And the company just literally transformed. It was, and I was there for much of the time.
Wow.
And I worked with people from IBM. One of my best friends left IBM after 25 years, and he and I were dear friends for another 25 years. And they just loved IBM because everything was so clear, and everybody was focused on getting results, and they were appreciated. And I still remember that great conference where Lou Gerstner called in all the salespeople and said, we've had all these problems in the last few years. He said, but from now on, sales eats first. It's just one of the great lines in business. Sales eats first. That, by the way, should be the governing philosophy of every entrepreneurial business, is the people generating revenues eat first. This should be considered and treated as the most important people of all. So those are the first two things, the law of three and the importance of starting with your most important task. The third part of productivity is to write out your goals. As I said before, write out your 10 goals every day. Every day. There's something about it that keeps you focused, that keeps you working on high priority tasks, that make you positive. And the wonderful thing, the greatest motivator of all, is the perception of progress.
Yes.
You got to feel yourself moving forward, and you're going to have more energy, and you're going to be more positive. And if everybody is doing the same thing, that's a wonderful thing about IBM, is when you joined IBM, you expected to be there for life.
Sure.
And IBM had entire neighborhoods in cities that were several hundred houses, and everybody who lived there worked for IBM.
Wow.
And they socialized together, and they married together, and their kids grew up and went to school together. And people considered being with IBM one of the great experiences of their lives. I was told when I was in high school that if you could get a job with IBM, you'd have died and gone to heaven. When you leave school, if you could get a job with IBM. And I didn't, mind you. So I never went to heaven. But
lovely.
But productivity is a very simple thing. Every day, make a list before you begin. Organize the list by priority. Start on your most important task, and just work on your most important task. There's a famous story of a young Scots boy a short guy. His name was Andrew Carnegie, and he immigrated from Scotland as a kid. His parents, his father was dead. His mother stayed in Scotland. And he came over, and he had to get a job, and he got a job at the age of 15, 16 as a day laborer. And in those days, you would go to the factory gates, and all the people who wanted a job would cluster at the family gates, and the foreman would come out and pick the people who were going to work that day, and they'd open the gates, and people went in and closed the gates, and they worked all day, and they got paid at the end of the day. So that's how he started off his life as a day laborer in Pittsburgh. And over time, he proved to be resourceful and hardworking, and he got promoted, and he became a foreman, and he became a supervisor, and then he became a junior manager. And he was sitting in his office, swamped by work one night about 8 o'clock, and this management consultant who had been working with the senior executives came past and stopped and came in and said, "How are you doing?" He said, "I'm just drowning in work." He said, "I have so much work, I can never get on top of it." He said, "If I could give you a method to get on top of your work," he said, "would you compensate me for it?" He said, "I'll give you anything." He said, "No, I'll help you. And if it's of help to you, then you give me whatever you think it's worth." So his name was Ivy Lee. It's a very, very famous story in American business. He said, "Take all the stuff that you have and make a list of everything that you have to do." So Andrew sat there while Ivy Lee sat on the other side of the desk and just took every piece of paper, wrote it all down. He said, "Now take a clean sheet of paper, and on the clean sheet of paper, write the 6 most important things on your whole list, which is 20 or 30 things. Write down the 6. And so he went through them carefully and wrote down the 6. He said, "Now, tomorrow morning," he said, "now organize the list by priority, and tomorrow morning start with number 1. You've already decided that it's more important than anything else. Just start with number 1, and then number 2, and number 3, and keep revising the list as you go through to make sure you're still working on number 1, and see what that does for you." And so we got up. It's now 9:30 at night. And the next morning, Andrew Carnegie came in, did exactly what he said, started with number 1. He said within a month, all his work was cleared up. He was one of the most productive managers, and he got promoted again. And he brought in Ivy Lee as an outside consultant, and he paid him more than $25,000 in bonuses for that one idea. It's make a list, start on your most important task, and then work on your most important task. And later, he taught this to every person who ever worked in United States Steel. And finally, he formed a company called Carnegie Steel, which is the biggest steel company in the United States. And he became one of the richest men in the world. And he was called the millionaire maker. Everybody who went to work for him was trained in this time management technique. And this technique made them hugely successful within his industries, and then hugely successful when they went on to other places. He was the millionaire maker. And I always remember that story, is that something as simple as making a list, organize that by priority, and starting on the top task would transform your life and your career completely. But that's the key to productivity. There's nothing else. If you don't do that, nothing else will work. If you do that, everything else will work.